And I think we're live. Yes, we are. Just checking that everything is working. Hello from Stoke-on-Trent. Hello from London. Amazing. Great to have you guys with us today. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Just give me like a thumbs up. That would be great. Hello from France, Spain, London, Italy, Brussels. This is incredible. East London, Istanbul. Wow, the chat is going crazy. I can't keep up with everyone that is joining in. Taunton, Hertfordshire, I should say, Austria, Finsbury Park. Wow, you guys are all over. Well, I'm currently in London. We should have had the language show live, but this way at least I can welcome you here. Welcome to my London flat. I'm calling in from West London, and I'm thrilled that you're all able to make it here today. It's very exciting. We're going to be talking about a really important topic about time management when it comes to language learning. So just a couple of things before we jump straight in, because we'll have lots of exciting things to share with you. So I'll be saving about 15 minutes at the end for any questions. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A icon. So if you just hover over down the bottom, you can actually send me questions, and then I can look at these later on, and then I can actually answer some of them at the end. So I'll take the questions at the end. So yeah, make sure that if you do have any questions, leave them there. And if I don't get around to them, because I'm pretty sure you're probably going to have lots of questions, and there's plenty of you that are dialing in. The number is jumping up really high at the moment. But I will be around on social media. You can email me. So any questions that I didn't get around to answering today, would be more than happy to do so after today's presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen now. So that means I won't be able to see the chat anymore. So let's get into it. I'm going to share now. So just checking on my secondary monitor here that everything is great. Well, thank you again for dialing in, wherever you are in the world. It's all happening here today because I'm very excited to present to you how you can learn languages like crazy, even if you have a crazy life. Now, what does that mean? It means, well, we've got so many things going on in life, and one of the things that can hold us back is time management and being able to actually squeeze in language learning that's actually meaningful so we can reach our language goals sooner. So I'm going to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Michele. Ciao, salut, hello, hey, I'm Michele. I'm originally from Melbourne, Australia, but I live here in London. I've been here for about 7 years or so. Before that, I was living in Italy. I was there for about 3 years. And I started learning languages as an adult. So I'm not anyone special. I didn't have any sort of extra advantages by learning languages at a young age. I started studying when I was about 17, 18, and it started very modestly, just with, travel phrase guides. But then I took it really seriously, and yeah, I've studied Italian, French, Afrikaans, Norwegian is what I'm studying at the moment. And because I was learning languages, I was so excited about the possibilities of being able to use languages for enriching my travel experiences. So I started the Intrepid guide, which is my website, my blog. It's where I document my language learning processes, and how I can help other people do the same, but also keeping in mind that language is such a big part of travel. So when you learn a bit of the language, you can actually have incredible experiences that you remember for the rest of your life. So I've got videos, I've got travel guides, I've got language guides, I've got free travel phrase guide cheat sheets so you can see how to actually interact with the locals. And I also have language courses now. So it's all part of the package to help you guys have the best travel experiences. So let me just jump into the next slide here. Right, so life getting in the way of your language goals. So I'm busy, you're probably very busy, that's why you're here today, and I appreciate your time. So we're all basically really busy. So how do you learn a foreign language that you've always dreamed of when you never seem to have the time? Like, it might feel like there just aren't enough hours in the day. And I can show you how you can optimize the time that you already have so you can finally learn any foreign language. So I'm going to be sharing with you my 3-step approach to language learning. So learning a language like crazy. And I'm going to be sharing lots of practical tips, strategies, and tools that will kickstart your journey for success. So if you're excited, then you have to stick around because I'm very excited to share this with you. So with so little time left in a typical day to dedicate to personal development goals, such as language learning, it can be discouraging and even disheartening when trying to figure out how to inject meaningful language learning time in your day. So the key word here is meaningful. So let's jump in, shall we? Now, there's an excellent proverb which perfectly sums up what we're going to be talking about today, and it's this: tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. So this particular quote was credited to Benjamin Franklin in 1985, but the original stems from a Chinese philosopher. So it's a Chinese proverb originally. So really the key to making real and continuous progress with your language learning is by being actively involved. So being involved means to be or to become occupied, to be engrossed, to be interested and part of the process and part of the activity. So this idea is explained further. So an American educator named Edgar Dale, he came up with this idea of the cone of learning. So 10%, this is basically what it means. So after 2 weeks of study or 2 weeks of being exposed to new information, we retain about 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, and 50% of what we hear and see, so at the same time, 70% of what we say and write, and 90% of what we actually participate in. So the rule here is the more that you participate, the more you learn and remember in the long run, and the faster your progress will be. So what does that mean for you as a busy language learner? So in order to get the most out of the time that you do have, and we'll discuss about how you can find that later in today's presentation, you need to focus on language learning methods and strategies that will help you reach your goals sooner. So it's not about just finding the time, but it's also finding the time and knowing what to do with it. So this means focusing on active learning, not passive learning. So what do I mean by that? So passive learning is where you receive content or information that someone else produces. So your brain is just absorbing what it hears and sees without you actively engaging in it. So you don't really focus or analyze of what's being said. The information just sort of flows over you and flows through. So you're not absorbing it and digesting it. But therein lies the problem. So if you're just sitting back, absorbing, waiting to absorb this information by osmosis, how much is actually going to be retained in your brain? Well, the answer is not very much at all. So for example, if you're sitting on the couch with a lap covered in popcorn, as you do, you might be watching your favorite animation in your target language on Disney Plus, which I love because there's so many languages available on Disney Plus. So if you're just waiting to absorb the language by osmosis, just by watching one of these movies, how much do you think that your brain will actually be able to retain? There's lots of information coming at you, right? So unfortunately, the answer is not very much, but you can actually start to change how you use this time. So sure, you may pick up a new word or a phrase or so, but this won't actually move the language learning needle. It's not going to make a big impact. So that's what we want. We want to make the most of the time that we have and make a big impact. So this is where active learning comes in. So active learning is the complete opposite of passive learning. Active learning is where you take control of your language learning and actively work to reproduce the language. So you're not expecting that your target language would just improve through absorption. So while passive learning feels easy and familiar, and you could do it for hours on end, like you can just binge watch plenty of TV, plenty of shows on Netflix, but active learning can feel challenging, and that's the difference. So it can be challenging, it can be difficult, it can be tiring, and it will exhaust you about an hour or so after intense concentration. So that's very different from passive learning. But this is where the progress is made. So this is the reason why active learning is so important. So I like to say, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. So you can actually feel that you're pushing against something when you're actually absorbing something and it feels a little bit challenging. That means that it's working. That means that it's good. It means you're on the right track. So there is, however, the opportunity to turn passive learning activities into active learning. So let's revisit the earlier example that I covered before of passively learning your favorite animation in your target language on Disney Plus, for example. Now, can you make this active learning? Absolutely. So there are countless ways to do this, but here's just one example. So you can watch the movie in short 10-minute chunks. So you watch the first 10 minutes, then you watch it a second time. And this time you actually start to write down words or phrases that you don't recognize or understand. And then you look up these words and you write down what they mean. And this whole pen to paper action is very important because your brain remembers, it's all that motor skills, it remembers things better than if you're just typing them down. So then you watch the segment again, so you watch it a third time and you pay attention to that new vocabulary and new phrases that you've picked up. And then afterwards, you write a summary of what happened in the film. So again, you're actively learning, you're piecing it all together in your mind. And you get extra points if you want to take it a step further, and you can share this information with someone else. So you're teaching them. But we'll get to this a little bit later and why that is so valuable too. So depending on how much new vocabulary you've learned in this 10-minute chunk, this exercise will take you anywhere between 40 to 90 minutes, and you can reduce the amount of chunks that you watch. It could be a 5-minute chunk if you don't have too much time. But the idea is that you don't need to do it all at once. So you can spread this out throughout your day. You can watch the first segment, 10 minutes in the morning, maybe at 10 minutes at lunchtime, and then again later in the evening. So you can make this work for you. But the important thing here to note is that spending this time focused on just a small part of the movie is actually more valuable than actually watching a whole movie for 2 hours and not really doing anything at all. You're not actively participating in the learning process. So what are some ways that you can inject some effective language learning? Now, there are so many ways, but here is just a few ways that you can start to think about it and maybe think about how they can work for you. So you can start with writing a journal. So this could be as little as 1 to 2 sentences. I'm not a big journal keeper. It's not my favorite thing to do in the world, but I take the pressure off by, 1 or 2 sentences, And usually once you start to write, you get into the swing of it and you get excited by but I remember I can say this. And so you never know, but just start small, start with 1 or 2 sentences a day. You could talk about the vocabulary that you learned earlier that day or the day before. You could talk about, you could write about your day today, what you're doing today or what you did yesterday if you want to practice different tenses or what you will do tomorrow. So find something that works for you and just write it down. It's really good for the memory. You could join language classes and contribute to class discussions. So asking clarifying questions when you don't understand something. This is really important, playing an active part in the class discussion. You could translate lyrics into your favorite, you could translate the lyrics of your favorite songs. This is a good one too. I love listening to Stromae, who's a Belgian singer. He sings in French and I just love to know what he's saying. And so I started to translate his songs. You could book a conversation on iTalki and practice using new words that you've recently learned. And maybe you could even teach them, what you've learned as well. It's like, I learned this and this is what it means. So all of that works to help with the recall in your memory. And we'll touch again on this a bit later on. But I'm a big fan of iTalki. It's how I keep myself accountable because I am busy. So I like to make sure that I have an hour block every week with my Norwegian teacher at the moment. So I have that time to do some really solid active learning. You could start shadowing. So this is the process of listening to a recording and simultaneously echo what you hear. So you repeat what you hear and you sort of focus on the pronunciation and the intonation as well. You can complete grammar exercises. I quite like doing these actually. I love grammar exercises. It just helps me to reinforce what I've learned. So you can get these online in an online course or from a workbook. So for example, you might have a textbook that you can use. And you can write a summary of a scene. So we touched on this earlier. You could write a summary of a scene of a TV show or from a documentary, some new ideas that you've learned. Or a scene from a movie where you're using new language that was, in context, so you can practice using that. I recently I was listening to a podcast by Joe Rogan, and they were talking about the oldest skeleton ever found. It's like 4.4 million years old. And I was so excited about this new concept, and that I actually did a little mini presentation to my class, my Norwegian class. And it was just a nice way for me to sort of reinforce what I had learned, but also to learn new vocabulary. So about the human anatomy and the evolution of man. So that's just one way that you can do it. And then you can also, like I did, prepare a presentation on a topic of your choice and share that with maybe your partner, teaching them, and they're like, oh, what's this? And then it just helps to reinforce in your mind and recall all that new vocabulary. You can share it with your classmates or your italki instructor. So teaching someone else is really key. So there is an old Latin proverb that states that the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else. And this is by the Roman philosopher Seneca. So he says, by teaching, we learn. By teaching, we learn. So this is where you get the optimum points, which I mentioned earlier. So if you really want to see if you've actually learned something, then see if you can teach someone else. See if you can teach your partner or a friend or your parents or someone else in your classmate. Maybe they don't know, they haven't heard it yet, heard the idea or the word. See if you can explain it to them. It's really important. Okay, so we know that memories are formed most effectively when you force your brain to do something. So when you write something down, you actively participate in processing that information, you're engaging with it. And you've heard it, you've written it down, and it makes it far more likely that you will remember it. On the other hand, by not engaging with this new information, it means that you are far less likely to be able to recall it. So here's another motto that I like to live by. If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. So we covered this before. So I'm going to repeat these things because they are really important. It's just like a nice little way to sort of summarize if you are on the right track or not. So, but this doesn't mean that passive learning isn't valuable and is a complete waste of time. That's not true at all, because every type of language learning has a place in the process, right? But passive learning isn't going to help you reach your language goals if you have limited time. And that's what we're talking about today. So if you have limited time, you want to focus on active learning activities. So this is the key point. So now that we've established that active learning is more valuable than passive learning, the next step is to identify untapped time in your day where you can inject your language learning. So you've probably heard of the term dead time. So dead time is when you're doing little to no activity. And it's the time of the day that we waste. It's futile. So for you, this could be 20 minutes when you're commuting to work each morning, maybe not now, but when the world opens up again and we are commuting again. It could be the 10-minute lag between meetings. It could be the half-hour slump that you feel after lunch. And you just can't bring yourself to do anything. And most of this time, we just sort of let slip through our fingers. We sort of prefer to, flick through our phones and read the news. But if we master the art of utilizing this dead time to our advantage, you'll be surprised at the difference it can actually make. So dead time can last anywhere between 5 minutes to an hour. So this will depend on your routine and your day and your schedule. But it could also be when you're doing the dishes. You've got a little bit of extra headspace to be able to think about the language that you want to learn. It could be when you're cleaning the house, when you're driving, commuting on public transport, or waiting in the line while grocery shopping, taking a bath, or even doing your makeup. So it's in these pockets of time in your typical busy day that the real opportunity lies. So you don't need to change your schedule. That's not what we're talking about today, where it's about finding these opportunities in the day, the structure of your current day. So you just need to add a little bit of language learning to these particular chunks of dead time. So the idea is to use these recurring time blocks to fit in meaningful, active learning time. So it's active learning and it's meaningful, and we're doing this in our dead time. So that's that term again, meaningful. So remember that. However, there is one caveat. Not all dead time is created equal. So some of your dead time will be better suited to passive learning dead time. So which, as you know, isn't going to help you reach your goals as quickly. But this is where this particular time is where your attention will be divided. And most likely your hands will be engaged too. So your hands will be busy doing something and you won't be able to fully participate in the learning. So for example, if you listen to a podcast in your target language whilst doing your dishes and you hear a word you don't understand, what are the chances you're going to stop, take off your gloves, find a dictionary, your phone or your laptop and look up the word and then add it to your notebook? Pretty slim, right? Like it's not really, you're doing the dishes, you're not going to stop every couple of minutes to do this. But compare this with listening to the same podcast on your train ride to work. Your hands are free, so you can just look up the word, You can pause the podcast, you can jot down the word in your notebook or your flashcard app or your Google Doc, and you can review this later. So guess what? You've just actively participated in your language learning during the day. So the idea can be summed up with do what you're doing. Do what you're doing. What does this mean? It means don't divide your efforts. So by spreading your attention thin, you reach your goals. You won't reach your goals as quickly as you can. So don't spread your attention. Do what you're doing. Focus on what you're doing. Be involved in what you're doing. Be involved in your language learning. Right, so how do you find your dead time? So your task is to find as many active learning dead time opportunities. So those pockets of time where you will have your hands free, that you can actively participate in your language learning. So find as many of these as you can throughout your day. So to learn, during your dead time, you need to first work out where it occurs. So while some of it is obvious, like commuting, a lot of dead time occurs actually without our notice. So small tasks like routine admin or lengthy processes, managing email, attending meetings, responding to colleagues on Slack, if you're doing that a lot right now. So while all these count as work, most of them are massively unproductive. So then there's the time spent for waiting for other things to happen, like boarding a plane, or you're at the doctor's office, or you're in a queue at the bank or the post office. So it doesn't matter if you only have a 10-minute time slot, once a day or 3 times a day, or a 1.5 hour block here, or just before you go to bed. Whatever you can manage is what is going to work for you. So don't compare yourself to others. No one's life nor their routine is the same. My life and my schedule is going to be completely different to yours. So what works for me won't necessarily work for you. But stay positive and stay focused on what you can manage so you can stick to it. This is the most important thing. So with time, as your routine changes and if language learning becomes a bigger priority, then you can maybe start to shift things around in your day and allocate a little bit more dead time to your active learning. So remember, small efforts lead to big results. Progress is still progress. No matter if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you're still going in the right direction. So don't shoot for progress. Don't shoot for perfection. Just shoot for progress. Shoot for progress, not perfection. Small efforts lead to big results, okay? Right, so now that we've identified when your dead time is, the next step is to decide what you're going to do with it. So choosing the right language learning tools, methods, and resources that will work best for you is also key. So to help you to do this, you need to know what kind of learner you are, what kind of a language learner you are. Are you visual, are you oral, are you verbal, are you kinesthetic learner? So you can find out, to do this, you can actually visit my website and you can take the short quiz to find out what kind of a language learner you are. You can see that there is a link here. And by the way, if you do want access to these slides, there is the URL at the bottom of the slide. So it is case sensitive. So just type that in and you can get this whole presentation and all the links work within that as well. So you can either check that now or check that later. Right, so once you've learned what kind of a language learner type you are, you can start to gather learning material to store on your phone or keep in your bag or just keep handy with you. So you'll always have easy access to the best resources that you resonate with, that cater to you and your learning needs. So here are a few suggested resources if you already know what your learner type is. So for example, if you're a visual learner, which I feel like I'm most of the time, visual learners learn best when they have an image and another visual medium to trigger data in their mind, the new information. So if you do use audio, such as like an audio book, it's a good idea to also have like the ebook version with it so you can follow along at the same time. So by working alongside the visual medium, you'll optimize your memorization and the comprehension of that material. So videos, media, and cultural immersion are also great ways for a visual learner. And next we have oral learners. So these guys are a talented breed. So they have the unique ability to capture information simply by hearing it. So this could be the case where you can do the dishes and just listen to a podcast and you're absorbing this new information, so you can just do it that way. So that could be one way that you can still have active learning, even though it could be, passive learning for someone else. So verbal learners, this is the next one. So they learn best by putting pen to paper. So fingers to keyboard is great, but putting pen to paper is shown to be more effective. And one of the most effective ways of a verbal learner to learn a new language is to write down their lesson material and repeat it back to themselves. So you can do this with like one-on-one lessons or group lessons or with a conversation partner. Now, kinesthetic. So this is anything that incorporates hand-to-eye coordination. So this is going to benefit kinesthetic learners. So it could be electronic games, so using the console, it could be sign language, it could be acting or even writing. So flashcards and group lessons are great for kinesthetic learners as well, or even like, you know, language learning holidays like I love to go on. So there we have it. This is my 3-step approach to learning languages like crazy, even if you have a crazy life. So let's just go through these steps again, because I kind of whizzed through it a bit because I know I want to get through to some questions. So let's do a quick recap here, shall we? So step 1, focus only on active learning. Active learning, remember? It's not passive learning, it's active learning. Step 2, identify potential active learning dead time in your busy day. So where are there opportunities for you to inject some study time? So step 3 is to take the short quiz that you can see here to find out, if you haven't already, what type of a language learner you are. So then you can pick up the right language learning tools, methods, strategies, resources that work best for you and your learning style. Remember, it's not a competition with anyone else and what they're doing and what they're using. By all means, listen to any sort of recommendations that you receive, but do what works best for you. And this is a great place to start, is by learning about what type of a learner you are. This is really key. And plus it's a good fun quiz to take as well. So if you only remember one thing here today, make it this. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. So get involved and watch your language learning skills and your language speaking skills skyrocket. So I really like this. It just sums it up perfectly, don't you think? Teach me and I forget. Well, tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. And this is what we want. It's all about active learning. So that's it, guys. Grazie, tak, danke, merci. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I can see that there are plenty of Q&As popping up, so I'm going to jump over and answer some of your questions. But like I said, if I don't get around to all those questions, there are a few of them, please feel free to reach out to me. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can contact me by email if you want to make it a bit more private. And if you do want to download the slides to this presentation and get access to all the links, then you can do that here. It is case sensitive, so just type in the capital L and the capital S while you do it. So thank you so much again. I'm going to stop my screen share and just jump over. Well, let me see if I can do both at the same time. Okay, let's see here. So Emma says, yes, the presentation will be shared afterwards. So you can do that just by visiting the link here that you can see on the screen. So you can type that in. So we've got Stephen Lee. Stephen, do you have any, I'm going to answer this one live. So do you have any tips for learning multiple languages at the same time? I'm currently learning Spanish, Italian, and French, and I'm wondering how to best juggle them in a time from a time and brain management perspective. This is a great question, Stephen, and this is something that I've personally asked myself as well, because I'm currently learning Norwegian, but I really want to learn Afrikaans, but they're part of the same language group. It's Germanic languages. And I can see a pattern here that you want to learn Spanish, Italian, and French. So the fear here is that you'll start to mix the vocabulary. So Spanish and Italian are very similar. And when I was learning French, the Italian would help me. They didn't mix too much, but when I was learning a bit of Spanish, and the Italian would interfere a little bit. So I would take a step back and prioritize which is the language that you really want to learn first, and get that up to a really solid level. So get it to about a B1 or a B2 level. Once you feel confident with that, then start to slowly introduce the next language. Because the idea is that if you try to do too many languages from a beginner level, it's hard for your brain to sort of recall. Like, the information is still very fresh. But once you get to a certain level, then you feel more confident and you can slowly introduce a new language. So I would definitely recommend trying that. Okay, let me see. So yes, we've got Gina here. So Gina is asking, when you are writing your summary of 10-minute chunks, are you writing in the target language? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But if it helps, if you want to write it in English first and then translate, or your mother tongue first and then translate, that's not a problem at all. But the idea is to start to think in how that language structures certain sentences. So always aim for writing in the target language. Yes, the slides. Yes, I can see that everyone's asking for the slides. What is italki and how do you access it? Great question, Valerie. So italki is an online teaching platform, so you can access teachers all the way around the world. So there are professional teachers, but also community teachers as well. So they may not have the same qualifications, but they have the same interest in the language and they can help you learn the language. So if you just go to italki.com, you can go on there, start to look for different, there's hundreds of languages that you can actually learn. It's pretty awesome. And they're scattered all over the world and you can see little videos of them and basically choose which teacher you would like to have a lesson with. And the first lesson is usually pretty cheap as well. It's only a few dollars. We've got one here. An anonymous attendee says, what do you think about the gamification of language learning, trying to learn Dutch from scratch? I found apps like Duolingo to be a motivator during lockdown to ensure I was engaging with the language every day, but not necessarily the most productive use of time. Yeah, exactly. I mean, some people love Duolingo, some people don't. I do use Duolingo every now and again. I also like Mondly a lot, but it's just part of my language learning toolkit. It's not one resource that I rely on. When it comes to language learning, you do need to have that variety because you get something from each resource, right? But there's also the pitfall that I personally have with the gamification is that I'm focused more on my score and getting through it really quickly, as opposed to actually learning and absorbing it. So this will depend on your personality. So just keep a lookout for those signs. But yeah, Duolingo is great because it's free. They also have the premium version, of course. But yeah, just don't rely on it too much. Just keep it as part of your arsenal of language tools and methods that you have. George asks, how do you rate Pimsleur? Pimsleur is great. I haven't used it too much, but I know that it's an audio course and it's very similar to the structure of Michele Thomas. Michele Thomas is a great audio course, which I really like. And it's a great way to get an introduction to the language. It's great. Like I was using Michele Thomas, which is very similar to Pimsleur when I was commuting to work back in Australia. And this was great because, my hands were free. I could stop, I could close my eyes, I could listen to it, I could absorb it. And this was really good active learning dead time for me. So when I heard new things, and even though you're not supposed to write things down, I would sometimes cheat and I would write things down. But it was just a really nice way to have that block of time to use for, following an audio course. But obviously you can't do that if you're driving, but you can listen to something like Pimsleur or Michele Thomas courses, when you're doing the dishes, when you're doing the housework, when you're doing grocery shopping. But the one thing I would say is that these audio courses work best when you're not engaged in any other activities. Because when you are shopping, there is a certain amount of concentration that you need. You need to know, right, what's on the shopping list, make sure I've got the eggs and the milk and all of this. So yeah, thanks for your question, George. We've got an anonymous attendee here. This is a great one. So we've got, are there any good language learning podcasts that you would recommend? Yes, so Coffee Break Languages is a really great one. They have it in several languages, Coffee Break Languages. So I would definitely look out for them. They're one of the biggest and the best. They also have access to premium courses as well, but the podcasts are free. So I would definitely check them out, Coffee Break Languages. Ellen says, once you've learned a language, what can we do to not forget this language when we move on to the next one? Okay, I'm going to answer this one live. Okay, so this is a great question as well, Ellen. So yeah, I once, to give you an example, when I had reached C1 in Italian, I was ready to finally tackle French. I really wanted to learn French, but I really wanted to be confident with Italian first. So I'd make sure that you feel confident in that language first before you start to move on to the next one. And then you won't need to revise that one. So say, for example, the Italian and French comparison I was making, you can still use your Italian. Like I was living in Italy at the time, so I still had that exposure, but you're not using, certain elements of grammar every day, for example. So you do need to sort of keep it alive, keep it active. And yeah, that way you won't lose the language, because you put in so much effort. It would be a shame to see that go to waste. So you don't need to do that intense study, just have some exposure. So it could just be listening to a Spotify playlist, for example, or watching a movie every now and again. So depending on where you live and the language of the place that you live in, but just a little bit of exposure is good to maintain while you're picking up this next language. That's right. Any recommendations for any podcasts for learning French? Yes, Coffee Break Languages. Definitely recommend that. Okay. So this is another great question here. So I find dual language books great, but have trouble getting hold of them recently. I bought mine in the 90s as a language student. Does anyone know where I can buy them? Oh, yeah. Well, there is a great site called Book Depository. So if you can't find anything on Amazon, I like to go on bookdepository.com. There's also the UK version as well, .co.uk. So you can always try there as well. There are a series of books that are really great as well, and that's short stories by Ollie Richards. So if you don't know who Ollie Richards is, he's from iwillteachyoualanguage.com. He has an excellent series of books for learners, and it's not just beginners. He's also released intermediate books as well. So they're dedicated to language learners. So yeah, definitely check that out. Short Stories by Ollie Richards. Where else? So many questions. This is so great, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time. Got a few repeat questions here that I've seen. What is your website and Facebook page? So you can see that on my screen here. So it's facebook.com/the Intrepid Guide. If you type in Intrepid Guide anywhere, you will find it. Thank you, Michelle. What do you do to motivate yourself if you don't feel like learning? This is a great question, JK. This is, I mean, one of the things I do, this is why I like to have italki lessons, is that I actually book in that time. Every Friday at 4 o'clock, I go on italki and I have my lesson with Anita. Anita is a Norwegian, but she lives in Malta. And even if I'm not feeling like it, if I'm rushing around and I've just done a workout or I've just had errands to run, as soon as I sit down at my desk and participate, it only takes me a couple of minutes to get into it, and my whole demeanor changes. I just get excited. I'm not distracted by anything. I haven't got my phone around. I'm just here, I'm present. So it's good to book in that time. Some people don't like language classes, but I do, because it keeps me accountable. I've booked in that time. I don't want to let my classmates down. And with italki, you do need to give a 24-hour period if you do want to cancel a lesson. So it's not like I can just say, 1 hour, I can't be bothered. But once I get on the call and I'm having my lesson and I'm talking, this is, I love this. It's kind of like when you work out, like you can dread going to the gym, but once you're there, once you're actually working out, the endorphins start to flow. And that's what happens to me when I start participating in my language learning. The endorphins start to come and I just get really excited, and it keeps me going. So just try to get started first. Just don't focus too much on not feeling like it, because once you start, you actually get into it. Very professional talk and really useful. Many thanks for giving up your weekend. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Really, it's really kind of you. Any examples of good flashcard apps? Yes, I particularly like Quizlet. Quizlet is free. You can manage your flashcards actually on the website, which makes it a bit easier to set up. And yeah, Quizlet is really great. Got a few more minutes here. Just wondering if you can find a good language learning resources for not. Oh, here we go. Yeah, right. Enya, I think it is ENIA, about finding resources for languages like Greek and Afrikaans. Yeah, I'll put my hands up. I'm totally with you. When I was learning Afrikaans, I found it really challenging to find resources. The resources that I could find were only in South Africa, and they were designed for students that were Afrikaans learning their own language, so kind of like an English speaker, you know, using English textbooks to learn more about English. So that wasn't really helpful at all. But this is why I find, and I kind of really struggle with that a little bit too with Norwegian. Norwegian doesn't have as many textbooks as well. There's not that variety that you get with Italian, French, and Spanish and other European languages, for example, or Asian languages. So I really like italki because the teachers on there have their own material that you can use, and these are really helpful. I do think, I'm trying to remember what the URL is, but learningafrikaans.com, I think it is. That was a website that has some nice material in there as well. But yeah, I would start with italki, and maybe if you have like a couple of meetings with some of the teachers there, they can direct you to different textbooks that maybe you can get your hands on. And sometimes it could be a matter of you actually going to the country to buy them there. I did this in Norway. I couldn't get the grammar books that I wanted. So when I traveled to Norway, I went to the bookstore and actually purchased textbooks then. So that could be one way to do it. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much. This was really helpful. Thank you, Diane. Would you say that one-on-one classes are better than group classes if you want to learn fast? Yeah, absolutely. I find it really tiring. So if my Norwegian classes go for 2 hours, and obviously I don't have as much talking time, but I'm listening, you know, a bit more to the teacher talk and explaining things. But definitely that one-on-one time, it's sort of it's just you and the other person. So yes, you will. It is probably a better way if you only have a 1 hour time slot. italki also has like 30-minute time slots or 45-minute time slots. So you can actually change that depending on how much time you have available. But anything that's one-on-one is actually it's going to be great for you, because then the teacher can cater the lesson specific to your needs. So if you want to focus on pronunciation, you want to get corrected, or any sort of grammar points or different tenses and verb conjugations, that's when you can do it. So that's when you can really hone in on any sort of areas that need improvement. Great question. Let me see here. What do we do when we are forgetful? Oops, sorry, I just accidentally deleted that one. What do you do when you're forgetful? Well, this is what we were talking about before, about finding out what your learner type is. How did you learn? What strategies did you use to learn what you were focusing on? Maybe you were using the wrong tools. So maybe make sure that you are pretty sure and confident with what kind of a learner type you are, and get resources that cater to your learning style. Because it's not, I mean, we're all forgetful, right? I forget where I put my phone sometimes, or where I've left my keys. So don't let that negativity hold you back. Don't think that there's something wrong with you. It just means that there's something wrong with the method that you're using. So I would always go back to the tools and the resources and the methods that you're using. So definitely do that. So I've got 1.5 minutes left before I have to say goodbye. I would take this one here. So do you use target language subtitles when watching films? Yes, absolutely. So for example, more recently, I binge watched the whole series of Emily in Paris. I watched it in English, and then I realized, actually, I could watch this in French. So then I turned on these subtitles in French, and I watched it again with the English and then the French subtitles. And then I noticed that there was the audio option to listen to it in French. So then I watched it again the third time with French audio and French subtitles. And what was great about that was because the actors who are French, they actually do their own audio or their own dubbing. So that was also a great way to practice my French. So yes, depending on what level you are, you may want to watch something first and then put the subtitles on. And sort of toggle around with the different settings. You know, if you want to, you know, if it's French, for example, you know, French subtitles, but English. But it's also a good idea to maybe start with any sort of movies that you know well. And if they have the option to turn on subtitles, you could do it that way, so you can see how things translate, and then you don't have to focus too much on the storyline. I find that if you have to focus on the language and the storyline and learning at the same time, it can be a bit overwhelming. So yeah, definitely start watching it with the target language. Okay, I'm going to have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we've just hit 1:15 in the afternoon here in London, and I need to allow for the next talk to come on and get prepared. Again, thank you all so much for dialing in today. I really appreciate it. And like I said, feel free to reach out to me on social media and email. You've got all the details here, and you can download these slides as well. So feel free to do that. And thank you again. I would love to hear from you. So please do contact me on Instagram if you like. And I'll speak to you soon. And hopefully I'll see you next year in person. Thanks, guys. Bye.